7, David Clendon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. I've called David Clendon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question to the Minister of Energy and Resources and asks, did Petrobras provide an emergency response plan outlining how they would stop a catastrophic oil leak or spill before the government issued them a permit to explore for oil and drill off the East Cape?
The Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr. Speaker, the government awarded Petrobras a 5-year exploration permit which allows Petrobras to acquire and interpret 2D and 3D seismic data and to drill one exploratory well. If Petrobras decides to proceed to drilling an exploratory well, and before any drilling operation can go ahead, it will have to develop a discharge management plan which must be approved by the Director of Maritime New Zealand.
Point of order.
Point of order, David Clendon.
Mr. Speaker, the question was on notice and is, I think, quite a simple, straightforward question. Was there a response plan provided by Petrobras before the government issued a permit? And I don't believe the Minister answered that question.
I think the member's point of order is a fair one. The question is on notice, and the answer did not advise the House as to whether there was any emergency response plan in the provided prior to the issue of the permit, and it may well be the Minister thinks that such thing was not necessary, but the House still does deserve an answer whether such a plan was provided, since the question is on notice. The Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr. Speaker, if I could clarify, in explaining the structured or the staged nature of the permit that has been made available to Petrobras, different steps are required at different stages, and the 2D and 3D seismic mapping have to occur before an exploratory well could be drilled, and if it were to be drilled, then at that point a discharge plan would...
Point of order, point of order, Materia Ture.
My apologies, Mr. Speaker, but again, the question was not answered. Did Petrobras provide that report before the permit was issued? The Minister did not answer that question.
Order. I believe on this occasion she has provided an answer, because as I heard her answer, she said that for this initial seismic mapping work that was being done, no such plan was required. So therefore, obviously, no such plan was provided. And that's quite clear from what she said. Now, members can question her further about that, but that was my understanding of what she said, so the answer is clearly no, because the Minister explained to the House that this permit provided for only certain things to happen. Now, if I'm wrong on that, I invite the Minister to correct that understanding, but I think it was a fair question on notice and a deserved answer, but I believe it has now been answered. David Clendon, supplementary.
Supplementary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Interpreting the Minister's answer to the previous question as no, could she tell us why the government is permitting any foreign oil company to explore and drill for oil in deep water without first providing an emergency response plan in the event of a leak or a spill?
The Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr. Speaker, I reject the premise of that question, actually, because as I explained in my primary answer, this is a staged process within the permit, and at each stage different steps are required, and since we have not reached the stage at which an exploratory well might be drilled, then the particular response necessary for it has yet to be considered.
Point of order, Dr. Russell Norman.
Mr. Speaker, we're now in a difficult situation where you interpreted, if you like, the answer the Minister gave as no, which we accepted, therefore our point of order didn't carry the day. She had answered the question. The Minister is now saying that she did not say no, so therefore she didn't answer the question as you interpreted the answer would be, so she's never answered the question at all.
Order. 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 A serious question, the primary question was asked, and I'm taking these points of order seriously. Forgive me, but as I understood what the Minister said that second time round is that because and this may not be correct, but I underheard her to say that because the staged permit does not at this stage provide for drilling, no emergency response plan was considered necessary. I mean, as far as I've heard the Minister's answer, she has indicated no such plan was required. None has been given because the staged permit that has been issued does not at this stage provide for exploratory drilling. Now, if I've got that wrong, let's hear the correction, the Honourable Hekia Parata.
Point of order, Mr Speaker. The permit does provide for an exploratory well to be drilled, but only in stages after the 2D and then the 3D mapping has been completed. If the data is sufficient for the company, then it can go to the next stage, at which point it would trigger further requirements.
No, as I considered it was actually the Minister giving a fuller answer, was my interpretation of what happened there. Does that assist the members? That answer? Further supplementary, David Clendon?
Supplementary, Mr Speaker. Recognising that the Minister may not be aware that a discharge permit is not an emergency response plan, could I ask if she agrees with Dr Nick Smith, Minister for the Environment, who said this morning that there are deficiencies in environmental protection in the EEZ where the Petrobras permit allows them to drill?
The Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr Speaker, if I could reply to the first part of the question. In fact, my answer was a discharge management plan, not a discharge permit, as the member suggested.
Is there a further supplementary question? David Clendon.
Can the Minister tell us how a new piece of legislation will plug an oil leak in the event of an accident on a deepwater drilling rig?
The Honourable Order. I think there was such noise around the House I couldn't hear the question. Ask the member to repeat it. David Clendon, please.
Mr Speaker, can the Minister tell us how a new piece of legislation will plug an oil leak in the event of an accident on a deepwater drilling rig?
The Honourable Hekia Parata.
As I don't know which new piece of legislation that the member is talking about, I can't answer the question.
David Clendon. Supplementary question.
Does the Minister expect that a team of 400 New Zealanders will be able to cope with a catastrophic oil leak or spill when 7,000 US Coast Guard personnel and over 40,000 other emergency personnel were not able to contain the Deepwater Horizon leak for some 86 days?
The Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr Speaker, Maritime New Zealand is responsible for ensuring New Zealand is prepared for and able to respond to marine oil spills. The Marine Pollution Response Service consists of internationally respected experts who manage and train a team of around 400 local government and Maritime New Zealand responders. New Zealand has equipment and other stores strategically located around New Zealand. In addition, Marine Pollution Response Service assists regional councils with exercise and oil spill equipment. The plan is responsive and regularly evaluated to ensure it meets changing risk profiles. Should the pattern of oil exploration...
The point of order has been called. The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, this is an extensive answer clearly to a different question. Can I suggest that the member just table it?
Order. The member's entitled to raise a point of order, and the answer being given didn't focus exactly on the question asked was the dilemma, because the question asked was whether or not the Minister believed that New Zealand's 400 people involved in some kind of response team in this situation could achieve more success than thousands of people in the United States of America in a recent Gulf spill. It was just an opinion being sought from the Minister. And admittedly, we got an interesting answer about how currently New Zealand does respond to such an emergency. But that wasn't the question asked. The question was asked whether the Minister believed our 400 could do better than the US thousands. And it's just an opinion being sought. I'd be grateful if the Minister would answer that. The Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr. Speaker, I was giving a rather long answer to the hyperbole that was in the question before to reassure us that the plan is responsive and regularly evaluated.
Point of order, the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr. Speaker, sort of far be it for me to be your protector. I think if there had been hyperbole in the question, you would have ruled it out, Mr. Speaker, and therefore that's a reflection on you.
Order, no, order. I'm trying to get us through this particular question and get members some satisfaction on answers they're seeking. Point of order, the Honourable Rick Baker.
To help the Green MP, could he rephrase his question and suggest that the Minister's Hansard be used as an alternative to the bill to plug the hole?
Order. Now, let's just go back to, let's be reasonable and go back. And I'd ask the Minister, it was an opinion question. It is within standing orders. It was an opinion being sought. The Minister, doesn't have to give any particular opinion, but the question should be addressed one way or another as it was asked. The Honourable Hekia Parata.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The point that I was getting to is that the plan is responsive and regularly evaluated to ensure it meets changing risk profiles. So should the pattern of oil exploration or production change, Maritime New Zealand would change its response accordingly, specific to New Zealand's situation. Thank you.
David Clendon, supplementary question.
Mr. Speaker. Given that the Gulf disaster was only stopped by a second rig drilling a relief well, does she expect Petrobras will provide a second rig in case there is a catastrophic leak in the exploratory well?
The Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr. Speaker, this is asking me to, am I asking you for a point of clarification? Because this is a hypothesis.
Order. House will be silent. The ministers and members are entitled to ask hypothetical questions, but obviously there's no precise answer to a hypothetical question. It was a hypothetical question whether or not a second rig would be provided to drill a second hole if anything went wrong with the first, and the minister's perfectly at liberty to say it's beyond, that it's a hypothetical question seeking a view, and there's no precise answer to it. The Honourable Hekia Parata.
Thank you for your guidance, Mr. Speaker. The response would be appropriate to the circumstances.
David Clendon.
Interpreting that as the Minister not expecting Petrobras to provide a second rig, does she have an estimate of the length of time it would take for a second rig to arrive in New Zealand to drill a relief well in the event of an accident?
The Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr. Speaker, no.
Tauraro Flavel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Kia ora tātou to the Minister. Does she agree with Dr. Apirana Mahuika that it is not Petrobras that was the genesis of the problems on the East Coast, but rather the Crown? And if so, what process improvements will she consider for future applications to ensure comprehensive and timely consultation with iwi?
The Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very open to suggestions on improvements, and I look forward to discussing these with Dr. Mahuika and with others.
David Clendon.
Supplementary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister, given the significant environmental risks associated with deepwater drilling, and noting that the Gulf incident involved over 50,000 emergency personnel and the spending of some $39 billion, what resources are available in New Zealand to cope with a major oil spill that were not available to the US government?
The Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr. Speaker, Maritime New Zealand is responsible for ensuring that New Zealand is prepared, and they do so through a marine pollution response service.
Question number 8, Grant Robertson.
Thank you, Mr.